The Trabant, a car that earned unflattering nicknames like the spark plug with a roof and racing cardboard, known for being underpowered, slow, and with dodgy build quality. But a car that became an iconic symbol of East Germany or the German Democratic Republic. A country that described itself as a socialist state but is remembered as a failed experiment in communism. Where secrets abounded, surveillance was omnipresent, and freedom was severely curtailed, and where stepping out of line could have dire consequences. It was here that the Trabi, as it's fondly known, began rolling off factory lines in the 50s, giving ordinary citizens a degree of independence under a repressive regime.
Viel Raum für ihr Gepäck.
With a two-stroke motor and a body made of a cotton fiber phenolic resin composite called Europlast, the Trabant was something of an automotive oddity. But as the car that broke through the Berlin Wall, its quirks and faults have since helped propel it to cult status. How could a car from a country that no longer exists turn into an international phenomenon?
Ein himmelblauer Trabant rollte durchs Land, mitten im Regen.
One life, but we're not the same. We can carry each other.
Join us on a journey to try and piece together why a car once so scorned is now looked upon with affection and sometimes devotion. This is the story of the Trabi. There was a time when cars like this dominated the East German cityscape. The Trabant walks the fine line between automotive lemon and cult car. Sure, it was powered by a tiny two-stroke motor that was smelly and noisy, but for the people of East Germany, it allowed the possibility of mobility and gave them a sense of freedom in a country that was otherwise riddled with restrictions. Smoke billowing out of the exhaust pipe and the distinct smell of two strokes that takes one back in time. But the Trabi's transformation into a cult car has everything to do with the Berlin Wall. The Trabant was emblematic of East Germany, a car much maligned and ridiculed. But the world only began looking at it fondly when the Berlin Wall fell. On the 9th of November 1989, as Trabi after Trabi crossed over from the east to the west, the quirky car attracted cheers and applause from the gathered crowds. Thus began its transformation from an outdated automobile to a symbol of resilience and hope for the people of East Germany. And one woman had the idea of immortalizing that moment for all of posterity. Birgit Kinder's painting of a Trabant breaking through the wall is now part of a mural on Berlin's East Side Gallery, the longest surviving stretch of the wall. The artist herself proved a little more elusive than her highly Instagrammed work of art. My search for Kinder took me to a remote beach in Puerto de Mazaron in Spain, where the otherwise Berlin-based artist spends her winters creating what she calls her East Stone Gallery. Although her beloved mural is never far from her thoughts.
To me, the Trabi was always a symbol of freedom, even in the GDR.
Birgit Kinder grew up in Thuringia and moved to Berlin in 1983. It was there that she first encountered the wall.
Suddenly, I found myself standing in front of the wall, and I realized this wall seemed to go on forever. I crossed the street and stood right in front of it, and I walked along it as far as I could go. And it was there that I first dreamt of painting the wall. I touched it and realized parts of it were porous, and I thought, okay, it needs a little primer. And since it's 3.6 meters tall, you really could paint something nice on it. And when I was lost in this daydream, I heard someone behind me. "Citizen, this is a warning. Please cross to the other side of the street." There were two border guards behind me.
In 1989, shortly before the wall fell, Birgit bought herself a Trabant Deluxe, the very same one she later painted on the mural. And as with many East Germans, owning and driving the car was a liberating experience.
It was a wonderful feeling with the Trabi. I had the feeling of freedom, and I was able to work outside the GDR too. I drove to Austria or Switzerland and was able to work on paintings there in my Trabant.
And it was the tiny two-stroke that led her to produce the work for which she's best known today.
When the wall fell, I read a newspaper article about how artists from all over the world were being invited to paint on the wall. I dropped everything, went home, put my paint supplies into my Trabi and drove straight to the wall. I chose to paint only on 3 sections because I wanted people driving past to immediately get my painting and what it expressed and think, wow, freedom. When the long line of Trabis drove into West Berlin, the people were so happy. They patted the Trabis on their roofs and celebrated with us. And nobody reacted negatively to this painting. The Trabi breaks through this concrete bulwark unscathed. It's a metaphor. I did this using the original paint I used on the wall.
Though Birgit has fond memories of her Trabi, she certainly wouldn't trade her Jimny for one now.
The car wasn't bad, but in my experience, when driving a Trabi long distances, you'd end up with a headache. The seats were really uncomfortable. The seat back was too short and there weren't always headrests in every car. And sometimes the exhaust fumes made their way into the cabin and you got a headache. As for climate control, you wound the windows down. When it was really hot in the summer, I'd put the seat all the way back and extend the seat belts with clothespins so that it would hang over me a little looser than before, because my back was firmly pushed into the seat back and it was really hot. So yes, there were several things that weren't really worth holding on to.
And though Birgit, like many others in East Germany, didn't hang on to her Trabi, her mural certainly contributed to the car's transformation from automotive lemon to pop culture darling. U2's 1991 album Achtung Baby featured a Trabi painted by Berlin-based street artist Thierry Noir, and there was the movie Go Trabi Go that chronicled the misadventures of an East German family as they took a road trip to Italy in their clunker of a car. How do you catch a Trabi? You throw chewing gum down on the road. What's the best feature on a Trabi? The heating at the rear, which keeps your hands warm as you push it. How do you double the value of a Trabi? You fill it up with a tank full of gas. There were plenty of jokes about the Trabant as time went by. But was it really as much of a nightmare as the jokes made it out to be? Who better to tell me about it than Uwe Schmidt, a third-generation mechanic whose family owns what was once the authorized Trabant service center in the Schönwalder Glen area in the state of Brandenburg, and whose love for the Trabant endures even today.
It was straightforward and simple and took you absolutely everywhere.
As someone who has spent a lot of time behind the wheel of various Trabis, or indeed under their bonnets, Schmidt isn't thrilled with some of the jokes about the car.
Seeing that it really was a car that so many people identified with and experienced good times in, the jokes were rather unfair. There were some you could laugh about, but many were not nice.
The Schmidt family has owned this workshop for over 70 years.
My grandfather opened this repair shop in 1947. In 1970, my father took over, and in 1978, we became what's called a contracted Trabant workshop. I began learning how to be a mechanic here in '78, right when we became an official workshop. And then until around the fall of the wall, around 1990, we worked only on Trabants. I have no idea how many Trabis came through here. It must have been literally tens of thousands, I reckon.
And for the most part, Uwe's never been too far away from a Trabi.
The first Trabant I owned was a round one like this.
And he's always happy to drive through his neighborhood in one of his Trabants, like this Kübelwagen, a machine once used by the East German army. He believes the Trabi's strength lies in its simplicity.
Every car has its own set of problems. The Trabant is actually a car with a fairly simple build. It was easy to repair. You could access everything, unlike today's cars. But you had to know how a few things operated, otherwise you could lose the plot. So you did need a bit of know-how.
But was it true that a pair of stockings could replace a damaged fan belt?
It's the truth. The fan belt basically powered the radiator fan and the alternator, and it would tear quite often. And if you didn't have a replacement, then you really could take a pair of nylon stockings, wrap it around a few times and tie a knot in it. And then you could make it to the next garage. From the first version of the car, things mostly stayed the same. There was a so-called underframe, which was really the load-bearing bit that everything was fastened to. The steering, the springs, the axles, the engine, and the gearbox. You could dismount it from the chassis with just 6 screws, and you could remove everything.
Of course, being a Trabi master mechanic and more importantly a Trabi enthusiast, Schmidt does believe a few things could have been done better.
There were improvements, or things that were proclaimed as improvements, but they were just small tweaks to what already existed. There were some really good engineers at the Zwickau plant. They developed a number of concept cars in secret, without the powers that be finding out. There were some good vehicles conceptualized, but because building them would involve revamping the production lines, the financial situation in East Germany meant the government halted any such plans.
As an authorized Trabi workshop, they weren't too badly affected by the infamous shortage of parts.
It was really tough dealing with the poor availability of spare parts. So it was better to be an officially contracted workshop. Then you at least managed to get a supply of allocated parts. Even if it wasn't enough, you were sure of at least getting some spares.
Regular Trabi customers didn't have such luck.
People would line up when they knew there was a delivery coming, and they'd buy what they could, whether they needed it or not, just so they could swap with someone who had a part they needed. That was quite common. So nothing was thrown away unless it was so badly damaged that it no longer worked. Things were always brought back to life and sold for a lot of money.
Perhaps Uwe's Kübelwagen is a testament to his skills as a mechanic, a machine meticulously cared for and kept alive. Imagine my surprise then when he allows me to have a go in it.
So, jetzt kannst du schon den zweiten Gang. Wir sind ja jetzt nicht so schnell. Das geht wunderbar.
Danke.
Super machst du das. Mach den Blinker wieder aus. Ja, das vergisst man immer. Na super.
Vielen Dank.
Bitte schön. Fahrprüfung hast du bestanden.
Mr. Schmidt's seal of approval gave me confidence while I was driving around Berlin in another Trabi, although I never did remember to switch the indicator off. The car I'm driving today is a Trabant 601, known for its extremely long production run between 1964 and 1990. It feels a lot faster than it is, and the brakes take some getting used to. But if you build it, someone will race it. And the Trabant has a storied history in motorsport that includes class victory at Rally Monte Carlo. Well, overall the Trabis only finished 71st and 72nd in the standings at the 1970 edition of the event. But that was good enough for Eberhard Asmus and Helmut Pieler to take victory in the up to 850cc class, and for Franz Galler and Jochen Müller to claim second place. It was probably the highlight of the Trabi Rally Factory team's career. Then there was what's considered the fastest Trabant in East Germany, the famed 601 raced by Klaus Schumann, a 5-time GDR champion in the Trabant class. It could hit top speeds of over 180 kilometers an hour and was renowned at racetracks around the Eastern Bloc. But the Trabi was the people's car, a machine that helped ordinary citizens kickstart their motorsport careers. Monika Petzold was a policewoman in the GDR, and it's the Trabi that got her rallying.
Even those who didn't know my name knew who the fastest policewoman in Berlin was.
Monika developed a taste for speed early on in life, and with a limited range of cars in the GDR, she turned to a Trabant when she wanted to go rallying.
When I began driving rallies, there wasn't too much choice in the GDR. There weren't too many options, either a Trabant or a Wartburg from East Germany, or a Russian car. That's why my career as a rookie began in a Trabant.
The Trabant was a relatively inexpensive car to attempt rallying in.
Cheap would be a stretch, because I think a car like that cost over 10,000 Ostmarks, but it was manageable. It was an old Trabant that we converted into a rally car, with a roll bar and a trip meter for the co-driver, with bucket seats, hand-sewn seat belts, because these Schrotbelts here are from West Germany. And we had similar 4-point harnesses stitched by a saddler out of old belts.
A few events in, and Monika was convinced of one thing.
I'd caught the motorsport bug, and I said, this is the sport for me.
As a member of the East German police, but a passionate rally driver, Monika was a study in contrasts. After all, behind the steering wheel, she really got to be herself.
I couldn't let off steam professionally. I had to stick to the rules. But rallying is special because it doesn't matter what you do professionally, whether you're a surgeon or a police officer or a lawyer. Everyone drove in rallies, and it allowed us to live a little.
One of the few women rallying in East Germany at the time, Monika was easily recognized. And the comparisons were inevitable.
Michèle Mouton was my great role model. She was the first woman to win a world championship event with the Audi Quattro. And she was nicknamed the Volcano, and I was nicknamed Mouton of the East.
And the rally championships in East Germany were hotly contested.
There were a lot of Trabants that drove in the National Rally Championship, and it wasn't that easy to enter because you needed an international motorsport license. And only the best drivers could get that. The others competed in regional championships. But the Trabi category was always the largest class with the most participants.
Despite the many adventures she had rallying Trabis, the car had its obvious limitations.
Not exactly the best ride. There's a steering wheel, 4 wheels, an engine with 2 cylinders, a bit like karting today.
But is it fun?
A lot of fun. There are no driving assists, none. No power steering. So it's very old school. At some point I decided that I'd like to drive a faster car than a Trabant with 26 horsepower. So I bought a 10-year-old Lada with 100,000 kilometers on the clock. We built a higher roll cage, bucket seats, and then I won rallies.
Monica even fulfilled her lifelong dream of competing in the Monte Carlo rally, and her Trabi days were firmly behind her.
I haven't been in a Trabant for 35 years. But after I was invited here to Stadtholder and asked if I wanted to compete in a local Trabant rally again, I was really thrilled. And I was lucky to have a very experienced co-driver at my side who knows every single metre of these country roads.
Volker Lampe rallied Wartburgs in the East German Rally Championship, but now prefers being a co-driver.
They asked if I knew Monica Petzold. I said yes, she was one fast driver. And they asked if I would be her co-driver. I said yes. Because Monica always has her braking point 5 to 10 meters later than I would. And that's how she gets such good timings. It's not the acceleration, it's the braking point that helps you win rallies in a Trabant.
It's now become a cult car. After the fall of the wall, no one wanted to drive a Trabant because it was too slow. Everyone got modern cars. But now it's en vogue again. Everyone wants a car like this, me included.
Sollen wir noch einmal Gas geben? Möchtest du das spüren?
Wenn du willst, ich würde nein nicht sagen wollen. But to truly understand the Trabant and the journey it's made into the hearts of some auto enthusiasts, it's not enough to merely experience the car. The Trabi's tale is incomplete without a visit to its birthplace. And it's not hard to figure out that you're in Trabant country when you're in Zwickau, where the Trabant, which translates to companion, was assembled for over 3 decades. Today, the former Trabi factory houses the August Horsch Museum with a dedicated Trabant exhibit featuring every version of the car ever made, and even a Trabi simulator. Exactly what it's like to drive a Trabi.
It allowed a personal freedom that was unheard of, let's say, 30 years before.
After the Second World War, Zwickau, once known for luxury cars from the Auto Union stable, switched to making an affordable people's car for the East German population. Enter the inaugural version of the Trabi, the P50.
In 1957, when it was first introduced, it could compete with cars from the West, from Western Germany. They were small cabin cars for 2 people only, maybe, or with engines much smaller than the engine of the Trabant. So they were able to export the car to Western countries as well, for example, the Netherlands or Italy or Greece. And then in the 1970s, the tide started to turn.
In its early days, the Trabant was a symbol of innovation. To combat a scarcity of sheet metal, a new material, Duroplast, was invented by engineer Wolfgang Bartel. The material combined low-quality cotton fibers that East Germany had in abundance with phenolic resin.
You have to imagine you have one thin layer of cotton, not very thick. And there is a very fine line of resin powder trickling over each layer. And at the end, you end up with 90 layers of resin and cotton. And that gives you that thick tissue. And that is then cut and then covered with the baking paper and eventually inserted to the press and baked.
The result, a body panel that was near indestructible and lived up to the name Duroplast, a material that wouldn't rust or erode and seemed to simply last forever.
I recall from my own childhood that we used, for example, the roof of a Trabant you could use in winter for sleigh riding.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you turn it upside down and...
Yes, you turn it upside down, sit inside, you go down the hill, you go really fast. And if you hit an obstacle, It might crack, but it's not really getting destroyed.
And from durability to capacity. While the Trabi P50 had a 500cc engine generating around 18 horsepower, and the Trabi P60 had a 600cc engine with around 23 horsepower, the most popular Trabi of them all, the famed 601, had a 594cc engine that turned out around 26 horsepower. The speeds at which most people travelled around in it might have been relatively low, but boy was demand for the Trabant high.
It started with about 2 years that you had to wait from the order to delivery. And in 1989, let's say, it could be between 10 and 14 years depending on the model that you chose.
In fact, it was the ridiculous waiting times that nearly turned East German singer Sonja Schmidt off the idea of singing that famous tune about a cuddly blue Trabant. See, she'd wielded some influence to get her hands on a Trabi and felt guilty about it.
Ein himmelblauer Trabant rollte durchs Land, mitten im Regen.
Waiting lists notwithstanding, over 3 million Trabants were made, the demand for them never dropping. And Trabis became associated with a very particular type of life in the GDR. Summer holidays, camper vans and trailers, and annual trips to Dachas, East German summer cottages. But beyond the idyllic landscapes dotted with Trabis, a sense of discontent was brewing.
In the 80s, people in East Germany had the resentment or had a hate-love for the Trabant. It was needed on a daily basis, and it was also a symbol of stagnation.
While the West had cars that had become significantly more advanced on the technology and comfort front, the Trabi remained the same. There were plans to try and develop new models of the car over time, and prototypes were built, but the political powers that be put a stop to it. The most significant change made to the car was in 1990, when the Trabant 1.1 was given an 1100cc 4-stroke Volkswagen engine. But it was too little too late. By the time the very last Trabant rolled off the production line, all love for it had been lost. What remained were a few unkind nicknames, like Zwickauer Rennpappe, which translates as Zwickau's racing cardboard, a reference to the Duroplast that had once been the Trabi's innovative highlight. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, Trabants were available for a throwaway price, sometimes even for free. There was also something known as the Trabi Trail that ran from the east to the west, where a long line of Trabants lay, unwanted, abandoned, and unloved. But one man's trash is another man's treasure. Today, the Trabi has become something of a collector's item, with even the youngest of Trabis having crossed the ripe old age of 30. The little machine is now firmly in classic car territory, which has helped increase its appeal. And it's gone global, from Germany to the rest of Europe and the UK. It's even caught the eye of car nuts across the pond. But I caught up with two Trabi fans closer to home. Brussels-based José Gonçalves has a fondness for cars from the Eastern Bloc. He's part of a classic car fan group who organized the Oostblok meeting in Belgium, one of the largest gatherings of its kind. And he's on a mission to seek justice for the Trabant, a car he believes has been the subject of unfair criticism.
It was always seen as the ugly duck and as a box full of problems. It is absolutely not true.
As someone interested in classic automobiles, the allure of the cars behind the Iron Curtain was impossible for José to resist.
For me, as a Portuguese coming from Western Europe, but from the west of Western Europe, was a world full of secrets, full of misconceptions, very far away, I thought back then. So I've been learning a lot, and I think that's also part of the charm of having a car like this that allows you to discover, to explore, to know more, and to change what you know already.
The car in question, his 1973 Trabant 601 named Helga. a machine that's helped him get a glimpse into a world he otherwise knew little about.
People often mention nostalgia. I cannot be nostalgic, I was not there. I was 5 when the wall fell, so I'm not looking back into something. I'm looking to understand and to know more of something that I haven't lived.
And the 50-plus-year-old machine is a very practical runabout.
I needed something that doesn't rust in the Belgian rain. But we used to do our groceries in the weekend, to go for a drive on Saturday and Sunday for a good lunch. I remember that in the very beginning we went to IKEA with it, and yes, it does fit things. And I remember I bought a coconut tree and a panda. They stayed in the car for a couple of days, so we were traveling around with a stuffed panda and a coconut tree in the back seat.
7 years in, and Helga's like a family member to whose defense José will always jump.
It has exactly the same issues, and you will encounter exactly the same difficulties as you will find in another car from the West from the same period. I also have one Mini from the UK. I don't find it comfortable at all. It's very funny as a car. It's more powerful than the Trabant, but in terms of loading capacity, carries less people and less luggage than the Trabant. It's harder to park than a Trabant, although it's smaller.
José's passion for the pint-sized passenger car is the reason he's built a garage true to its time period, where he hopes the Trabi will feel at home, while he goes about restoring the car's reputation.
The reputation, and not only, rescue the cars themselves, because they are disappearing. To make people interested in these cars, make sure that they don't end up in a scrapyard. Having them just parked in garages or in a collection fund is not actually interesting for us either. It's important to see them on the road, to keep them rolling. I think it's important to do it for the community that we will have in 20 years. So creating community is also that, is giving something to the next generation.
And while José reflects on the importance of keeping Trabants on the road for the next generation, another Belgian collector's love of Trabis has led to a private museum featuring 13 actual cars, 1,950 scale models, and assorted Trabi memorabilia.
I don't only Trabant, but the size don't matter.
Mark's passion for Trabants began the day the Berlin Wall fell.
I saw on the television the first Trabant, that was on the 9th November 89. And then a friend of mine, he bought a Trabant. And then I saw it for the first time, a real Trabant. And I bought it then in 93. And then it started, so more and more Trabants.
Including rare editions like one of the few Trabis that were exported to the West back in the day.
I have more Trabants, of course. This is very special because this Trabant has been sold in Belgium as a new car in '65. It's completely original, and it has been in a garage here in Belgium for 41 years. And now I've bought it. Okay. Yes, and I think there are now still 10 pieces or so from real Belgian Trabants. Over here I can show you 2 more Trabants. Here you see a Trabant, but it's not a very good one. This is for pieces. This is the very, very first Trabant that I saw and that I bought. And also you can have the smell. Smell.
It smells like
It smells like Duroplast.
I'm going to take a whiff.
The older the Trabant, the
oh yeah, that's
more smell.
Yeah, that's a very
The
distinct.
new ones is not as much as the old ones.
He's even turned Trabi spares into works of art, a testament to his enduring love for the car.
The 2-stroke engine is special, the Duroplast outside, and also it is very simple. When something breaks, I can repair it by myself. You cannot find a more simple car with less parts. You will not find it. That's why I choose the Trabant.
And given that space is limited as far as real cars go, Mark's turned to scale models.
I bought in '94 2 small Trabants, and since then I start buying more and more and more and more. It's the blue and the green ones that were the first that I bought. Okay. These ones are very important for me because these cars, they are 60 years old and they have been produced in East Germany as toys for the children. And it is not easy to have the keys and the boxes. Mostly the keys and the boxes are gone. Yes. And also these ones, they are also made as toys for children in East Germany.
The scale model collection includes a chronological evolution of the Trabant, scales made to order with popped bonnets and engine bays, scale models made of toy bricks, models made of wood, models made out of old tin cans, and models that track the Trabbies' adventures in motorsport. There's even a special Trabant scale model that commemorates 10 years of Mark's Miniatuur Trabant Museum. And Mark leaves no stone unturned in his quest for more Trabbie collectibles.
I drove immediately to Aachen to buy it, and then in winter. I know where I found it, that was in Duttersveld. A meeting of Trabants in Duttersveld. I said, hola, mine. There were also, I don't know exactly, I heard 100, 300 of these ones.
But perhaps the showstopper at the museum is a recreation of the Berlin Wall, complete with a Kugelwagen and border guards.
I made it in wood, okay, so that you can see wherefore it exists, a Kübel. Huh?
Ah, jetzt höre ich natürlich den Gitter.
It's not so easy to find it, and when you find it, it's very expensive. But in the 90s, they threw it away. Huh? In East Germany, they threw everything away, also the Trabants, huh? They threw it away.
Precisely why Mark's Trabant Museum exists, preserving everything associated with the once unloved Trabant with an unstoppable determination.
I buy all.
Okay, all right.
Oh yeah, I still have place over there, you see. It's empty. I can put it full.
Context is important, and given when the Trabant was designed and where it came from, it's hard to be too critical of the car, I suppose. And I, for one, am really glad that Trabant still exists. After all, the closest thing we have to time machines are classic cars. So there you have it. The little Trabant seems to have slowly wormed its way back into the hearts of people, even those who had once been keen to break with it. It's by no means a good car. What it is an automotive relic that represents a troubled time firmly in the past. A machine now viewed kindly through the rose-tinted lens of nostalgia. Is there a car that got your country motoring? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about global automotive culture, subscribe to DW Rev.